I'm here. Yeah, good morning, Steph.
Perfect. Well, I will, yes, so I'll be available on the chat if anybody has any questions, and then over to you, really.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As Sophie says, we're just replicating what we did at the Care Show, but they were so well received with such generous feedback, really. We thought, well, why not do them again and share with a wider community? So hopefully you're going to find these topics really interesting today, both myself and Sophie. And I want to share with you really about leadership, and that's what you've signed up for today to join in, and what really works best in the care environment, and then some other links to what we've been doing. So as Sophie says, fire the questions in, we'll answer them. We're quite open, and we will try and share as much as we can. So firstly, for those who don't really know us too well, who are we? Well, we are the Judgement Index. That's the company name, but also the key tool we use for the analysis of value-based behavior of people. And we'll mention that later on. So what do? We work in a variety of sectors, but key for the last 5 years, we've been really focusing on this care sector. And we help our clients develop people and also retain people by hiring people. So we're involved with selection and development. Aside that, we also host leadership academies and develop the culture of people and run workshops from that way. And it was great that recently we were featured in a CQC improvement report with based on a client we'd worked with, a great client, Sonic Care. And again, last year we conducted a large study looking at outstanding care managers. And in the words of Andrea Sutcliffe, the chief exec of CQC, is that you will not have an outstanding care home without an outstanding manager. And around her will be outstanding performers. Or him. I said her. It's the year of the woman, isn't it? 100 years. Anyway, the Judgement Index, just a little touch on that. It's scientifically proven. It's probably the most scientifically proven and accurate assessment of its kind in the world. There's over 40 years research, Nobel Prize nomination, and we work in a number of world-leading care organizations. And I mentioned the Mayo Clinic there because it is probably one of America's top research hospitals, and you don't get through the door without having credibility. And the basis of what we do, we measure value-based behaviors and capacity for good judgment. And we put in there risk, because we will uncover elements of well-being and compliance and risk. But onto the work and really what I'm going to share with you today. So let's start talking about leadership. And what I want to share with you is, again, from the work we've been doing, is what style tends to work best and what type of person tends to work best and what the outstanding leaders seem to have within these outstanding care homes in the care sector. I mentioned flexibility because it's never about you. And I put that down because great leadership is never about the leader. It is always about the environment, scenario, and situation, which we'll come on to. And also that is never far away and is explicitly linked to it, is developing the right culture to grow leaders. And I come at this from probably my years in the military, where the ethos, and I think this works really well in the care environment, is if you have an ethos of everyone is a leader, and if they're not outstanding as a leader or don't show those qualities, your aim should be trying to develop people with that leadership mindset from day one, because without a doubt they are going to lead people. They're going to lead residents, clients. They're going to lead people. If at the base level, they're going to lead themselves, and they're going to have to make critical decisions and the right decisions and keep calm in certain scenarios. So having that ethos is really important. So leadership styles. So let's pretty much start to share the work we've done from this leadership styles. And what I want you to do from a second is think about what sort of leadership style you have. Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into. Do you have a style? Do you have a flexible style? Are you a chameleon? Or what sort of a person are you? So today is going to be as much about a self-reflection, but we will share with you how you can do a straightforward, simple analysis on this as well. We'll be putting that information out. So let's look at the leadership styles, and let's just look at what Daniel Goleman came up with. Now, Daniel Goleman talked about, sorry, I'm just going to reverse back one. I jumped a slide. I do apologize. I thought I had. So let's pause about the quality of leaders. Let's look at these six characters and think, where might you be on that list? And what would the different qualities and attributes each one of these people had? We've got some quite diverse characters there, haven't we? We've got Trump and we've got Obama. What sort of styles did they have? We've got Churchill, we've got Martin Luther, and what sort of styles they had? And what fits best in your environment? I know I've put up there Florence Nightingale because, we're in the care sector. Look at the type of leader she may have been. Well, by all accounts, she was very visionary in what she was doing. And she was very determined in her ambitions and what she wanted to do. And according to the scripts that I've written, she was sort of task orientated about getting things right. So not a long way away from the things you've got to do and some of the qualities you might have. I've also put in there Emily Pankhurst because, 100 years of the suffragettes, let's celebrate that. And some of the stuff that Emily Pankhurst had, some of her qualities as a leader, she had that vision. She was driven by equality. And I love a quote she came out with. One of Emily Pankhurst's quotes was, trust in God, she's always with you. I thought that was a gem. So looking at those type of people, let's start to look about the leadership qualities. Now when I'm talking style of leadership, I'm pretty much talking about the communication used, not necessarily the energy put over, the emotions put over, but the style of language used. Yeah. And Daniel Goleman was a genius who is still a genius. Daniel Goleman's still alive and kicking. But Daniel Goleman did a lot of work looking at different leadership styles. And there's pretty much 6 type of styles that he came out with that you might lean to. You're going to have elements of all of them, but it's where you might lean to at any one point. And this is what I want to start exploring because this is linking to the situational leadership and the flexible styles. So here we go, back to the styles. And the best leaders are the ones who tend to bend and flex the style depending on the situation. Hence that quote I made earlier about it's never about you. It's always about the scenario and situation and the type of people you're working with. So Goleman's got this Leadership Styles Questionnaire that you can get access to, and we'll send you out and you can pitch yourself against it. And there is no wrong and right in this. It's not about the style. It's about the style being appropriate for the scenario you are in. What is really interesting, I feel, is that we're not implying now energy and emotion, and it's purely about the delivery and the language used. So Martin Luther, reflecting back on him, give visionary type words. I had a dream. I had a dream. And that sort of language is visionary. Commanding words can be more direct and more tell. Coaching words and democratic words will be more ask. The affiliative style will be somebody who will be engaged and connected and in amongst the people. And the pace setters are typically people who will be very structured around time, about keeping tasks to space and time and keeping people on track. So there's a variety of styles. Now, what should be a big factor in the style you use, which should be, one, the scenario you're in and the crisis level that you're in, and also the people. Are the people highly technically skilled and highly motivated? Do you need to tell them what to do, or are they well able to be empowered to crack on? Should you be coaching certain people? Should you be selling the dream? Should you be highlighting that dream and vision? Because that will be very motivational. Should you be affiliative and get in amongst them when they need you? A very Churchill style. His speech, we will fight them on the beaches. That was Churchill saying, I'm in amongst you. This is what we are going to do. Or are you the pace setter? Now, I know for a fact that a lot of high-performing and outstanding care managers and care leaders will be very good at a number of these, and particularly they will be good at pace-setting leading. They will be able to keep people on track, keep people on pace with what needs to be done. because the volume of tasks you have to get through. So having briefly had a look at these 6 styles, maybe have a reflection about where you are with it. So a couple of questions I want to ask you and pose to yourself is, what sort of style do you use most currently? Do you flex your style with different people? Do you flex your style with different scenarios? Are you always in tell style and that command style? Do you spend too much time being democratic and asking people and trying to coach people when it's probably not appropriate, or it might be appropriate? And how energized and what sort of a vision have your people got going forward? Are you all on the same page? Are you going forward together, or have people got their own agendas and are different? Are you selling that dream? Have you aligned your people's vision and values and dreams about where they're going? Or reflecting, is there certain times when you should change your style? And to what extent have you got the flexibility to do that? I come across far too many leaders and managers who are pretty much my way, the highway, and one style fits all. Well, it doesn't, I'm afraid. And you're only going to resonate and connect with probably 20% of your people in your organization, and that will only be at given times. So to what extent can you flex your style? So pretty much what do outstanding managers, went from our research and work, what have the outstanding managers tended to look like from the study and the work we've done? Well, it was being a bit of a geek with stats, and we use the Judgement Index. We did this study in tandem with Article Consulting, Sedi Frederick Article Consulting, a great organization, and they asked us to look at the analysis of the value-based behaviors and qualities of outstanding managers. And it's really interesting then to tie in the styles of leadership with some of the things that outstanding managers do. So what I'd like to do is just share a bit of that work with you now today, so you can perhaps compare and contrast what you are doing with these great people. So these were some of the findings. So some of the findings were that simply after the people had done the analysis, we could determine that 100% of the managers we interviewed had very strong personal reserves, personal sides. We call it the self side with the Judgement Index, but they were very balanced. So they had good resilience. What is a key word, grit, is being used a lot. And it was very interesting to say how strong they were in the personal world as well as the working world. They showed a great balance and an even balance of value and capacity with both people, with getting tasks done, and also the key ingredient here, strategic or lateral thinking, ability to see sideways. We see far too managers who sometimes have a dominant side to either the people or the task, and then neglect to sideline other things like the strategic stuff or whatever. 75% of the people featured as one of the top problem solvers that we ever put through the material. So outstanding managers fitted in with the likes of high-performing project managers and project leaders, top military leaders. They were very quick and very capable of problem solving and coming to conclusions in a very balanced way. They were very intuitive. Funny enough, this maps the intuition. When I'm talking about your intuition, that mapped very well against the best midwives we put through the material in the Mayo Clinic. Now, they are an unusual person. The midwife in the Mayo Clinic has got such intuitive skills. You would think they're from another planet. I'm saying that in a kind way, because they are so gifted and skilled. And interestingly, the outstanding managers had very similar ability to be intuitive about their environment and the people around them. They also had very good coping mechanisms in stress. They did show slight susceptibility, I'm getting my words stuck, to burnout. And that was probably due to the high motivation and strong work ethic. But you could see there were other things, like they were fairly healthy in their self-criticism. They were very accurate and precise about following directions and understanding what was right and wrong. So these type of things we were measuring the Judgement Index, and they absolutely blew me away when I compared them against other managers, some who perhaps struggled because they were a mile apart. So So you might want to have a think and look at some of these things, and perhaps look over this slide later to try and measure yourself against some of these things and think, where am I now? Because this will fundamentally impact on how you lead your people. So how do we spot future leaders, and what should we be looking for? And I'm going to talk about some of the tips and some of the things you might want to look at. But you've got to ask yourself, one of the interesting things, is it nature or is it nurture? So the great leaders, are they born leaders? And I hear that a lot from people. Are you a born leader? Well, you're developing all the time. You're developing in the womb as a baby. You're developing later on. So you're perhaps some of the characters things that are being delivered and developed. But far too often we see fantastic potential in people. It might be the shy, quite reserved person, but they've got certain qualities that you just got to tease out. And it's not always the person who's extravagant and or egotistical and overconfident that turns out to be a smart leader. There's far too much about it. I sometimes align this to sport, where we work with currently work with international sports teams and high performing sports people, and when we talk about being an elite athlete, well, people say, "Oh, were you born that way?" Well, certainly the nature and the genetics will be a part of somebody becoming super fantastic at that world level. Probably in the top, let's say, call it top 5% in the world. However, you can become very strong by just nature and by training and by development. And a lot of this stuff you can develop leaders in. So, I mean, some of the key things you want to be looking for in your future leaders, I think we want to determine one thing. First, leadership skills can be taught. You give me someone, we can turn them into a leader. We can certainly turn them into a more confident, better leader or team leader or manager than they are now, if that is needed. A key thing is enthusiasm and motivation is the key, but really you've got to find out, have you unbenched that? Have you benchmarked that? And do you know what drives your people? Do you know what motivates from an intrinsic value? What drives them? And is it just bling, cha-ching, and money and external factors, or is it intrinsic, deep drivers? Do you know that about your people? I always say to people who come on leadership courses with us, when you go back, find out what the internal drivers are of the people around you, because if you don't know their values and know what drives them, you're never going to be able to shift them in the right way. So some of the key things I typically look for, I look for intuition, look for people who are smart, and it might be a very reserved person, it might be an extravagant person. Look for people with good intuition to be able to read scenarios. Look for trainability, how many people can train and take things in. The self-assuredness, yes, but again, it's something we can train. A couple of things we've found that are massively neglected in our people is probably developing some of these soft skills. Confidence is always a real issue for leaders coming through, particularly young leaders who are being promoted based on their qualities of skills and knowledge, but then get into that realm of having to lead and manage people, and they may struggle. So the soft skills, how to deal with conflict, how to give feedback. One of our top things is to give feedback in a coaching style. So it's simply an ask, and it takes away all those aspects about conflict. Limiting beliefs. And again, this is your job as the leader, and this is your style, and what you should be looking for is what are the beliefs and dreams of the people around you? And again, I'll go back, are they aligned with where the organization's going and its ambitions? And if your people have limiting beliefs, it's normally linked direct to their confidence, is they are limiting themselves. And people who dream average will typically never get beyond average. So to what extent you as a leader are opening up them dreams with that visionary style to open people up and then challenge these limiting beliefs they have about who they can become. The state management is where we're talking about controlling emotions in stress scenarios and managing emotions, very much linked to the emotional intelligence stuff. And again, Daniel Goleman was the genius who sort of started scribing and researching about emotional intelligence. And it's really an area you should be looking on. And we'll be doing future webinars about the impact of emotional intelligence when, one, you're managing your own emotions, but two, you're managing the emotions of other people around you. And it's a critical factor for the care sector, without a doubt. Just as you can see there, if you just glance on the right-hand side of this page, you can see a typical care worker report. And that's a typical report we created, and 15 indicators just to benchmark high-performing care workers. And I'll come on to that because we're just about to do some more research in a second. Now, what goes hand in hand with being a great leader is your ability to create the right culture. Because fact is fact. You could be, if you think you're a great leader, but you've got let's say, an inappropriate or a poor culture around you, you're not actually as great a leader as you think you are. And likewise, you can never have a great culture if you've got poor leadership. So the two are absolutely linked. So what I will ask is the style of leadership, and what works best is a leader, again, who can develop this fantastic culture within an organization. I'd perhaps like you to think about what's the best place you've ever worked and what made it great? Just pause for a second. What made the best place you've ever worked great? Ask yourself and answer that question. So was it the money and material things? Probably not. It was probably the culture that impacted so much on the environment that made it such a great place. And why? Because it's driven by value-based behavior. Values are linked to behavior, are linked to culture. And if you get that right, you can have a fantastic place to work in. So this is why it's important to get this right from a leadership point. And if you sat there thinking you're a great leader, again, but your culture's not great around you, or you've got little teams with little cliques and people aren't working together, maybe you've not got it quite right, and this is somewhere you want to readdress. So you can create the best culture possible, because that will keep your people. And this, again, will link to Sophie's talk, because it will all have a massive impact on retention and recruitment. So how do we do it? I think one of the key things is it's about empowerment and engagement. Now, people talk to me about empowerment all the time, saying, oh, we've got to empower our staff, we've got to empower our staff. That, again, comes back to the styles of leadership. What are the people like? What is the crisis level right? And that is empowerment appropriate for those people. Because if they're not motivated, they haven't got much of a clue, then it's probably wrong to be empowering them. However, so that might need a level of engagement prior to their empowerment. So what I'd like you to do is perhaps, again, reflect now. The values you've got written up on your wall as you go through to your organization, are these reflected in the behaviors of your staff? And to what extent are they reflected? I also like to ask, to what extent do your people own and have had a part in designing and developing the values that you have written on the wall? Or were they just told by the boss? Did they just get thrown out one Friday night and said, this is our values from now on? What's interesting is that these values, and again, I've seen plenty of values on walls that are fantastic and are not a problem. And what might enhance that, because you might not want to go start carving up your whole values again, is to allow your staff to start to discuss and facilitate what I call culture statements. So how are they going to live, breathe, work, and what's the spirit of the organization going to be when they're working together? Now, if you can start to explore that on mini workshops, and we can support you with that or send you some information to do that, that starts to bring the values to life. So cultural statements are actually almost a contract about how you're going to operate and what you're going to do. So you could put those up, and you could actually, this is what you can empower out to your teams and sub-teams so they can start to develop this. And so you as a leader can start to understand the true values of your people and how they want to live and breathe and work together and how they're going to contract that. So giving ownership of this to your staff and giving empowerment to them to do this gives a real level of ownership and engagement. And then staff become empowered. And you know when it's working, because after 6 months down the line, after they've designed these culture statements, they've started working on how they're going to operate, and they've been engaged, they will start to challenge each other when people do not fall in line with these values. And when they fall out of kilter with the culture statements of their agreement of how they're going to operate. Now, when you can get synergy with your people, the culture, and your styles of leadership, and they understand, and everyone is speaking the same language, and this isn't just boss, this is everyone from boss all the way through the organization, are sat on the same page with the same values and culture, driven by a similar language, knowing there's a flexible style of leadership who will appropriately deal with scenarios. That's when you're on the road to outstanding, and that is when you're going to be something special. Resources. Just looking forward, we're going to share with you a lot of information, and you'll be able to, if you're logged onto this, you'll be able to get all this about the Outstanding Manager research. We'll share the Goldman's Leadership Styles, Sophie's phenomenal podcast series that she's been doing, interviewing some really fantastic people in the care sector, and obviously the Judgement Index clients. We've got our webinar, but feel free to inquire more about that, and they'll all be emailed out later on today. So that's leaving a couple of minutes for questions, and I know we've had some whizzing up there. So Sophie's going to jump up and sort of share with us some of the points and questions. So thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't questions as such. So no, we haven't had any questions so far. I don't know if anybody had anything. Feel free to put any questions into the chat box.
Yeah, or challenge or share with us something fantastic that you are doing and what you think's working with your environment. That's probably just as important. Just feel free to share now, and we'll have a look at that.
I know one point that you made, I was just going to pick up on, that you were saying about the leadership styles, and just to let everybody know that we will send you a link so that you can actually download the Leadership Styles Questionnaire. This is something that was really popular when we shared with people after the Health Plus Care talk, and people were actually going away, printing off that questionnaire and doing it with their management team or their team leaders, so that everybody could understand a little bit more about what style they're using right now. So it's a really good exercise to do in your next team meeting. Obviously, there's no right or wrong about it, but it just really helps sort of start a conversation about leadership styles. So we'll make sure that everybody has links to that afterwards.
Yeah, I think what's important, if you do the leadership styles, just understand that it's not about what style you've got and what style you're using more of. Is it appropriate? And that's where you've got to look a little bit wider about the people you're working with and the crisis levels, etc., and then decide what's the appropriate style to start using. And again, remember, we've mentioned nothing about the character and the emotion and the passion that you deliver with when you're delivering. That's a really critical point. To what extent will you deliver and send a message with the right level of emotional content? So I think that is almost up, Soph, but if there's anything coming in.
Yep. So we do have a question saying, do you find behaviour frameworks in organisations help deliver the right culture?
Behaviour frameworks, contracting people to act in, yeah, because behaviours are driven by values. So providing that the behaviours are linked to the values of the organisation and how you want appropriately to, that can help because people know where they are. I think a critical point about that is that your people in teams and your care organisations are engaged with an opinion on the types of behaviours that are appropriate. I think that's important, because if I'm telling you what behavior you're going to have, sometimes that can put people up. But if I engage with you and ask you what's appropriate in an environment, that's a whole different ball game. Yeah.
I think as well, if obviously the slide is on the screen now saying that the next webinar is at 11, and that's the webinar that I'm going to be hosting, which is focusing on recruiting and retaining staff, but some of that is going to come up in that webinar as well. So these two webinars, they are different from each other, so if you've registered for both, it's well worth watching both because they are covering different topics, but obviously you'll find that there's a bit of crossover in certain things as well. I don't know if there's any more questions. Everybody's still on, but I don't know if there's any more questions.
Well, thanks everyone, and don't be shy. Our organisation, one of our remits as Judgement Index is to share whatever we can to make your sector and the environment better. So if we can share, and it's all about best practice, and we've taken best practice from a range of environments we've worked in the past to try and do that with the care environment. So please reach out to us. You can always get hold of us, contact, ask the question, and we'll be there. We'll be there to help. And thank you very much for listening today. It's been great.
And what I would say, just one last question that's come through that's just said, will we be able to watch this again later? We are going to get this recording uploaded onto YouTube, and then later on today we'll send an email to everybody who's been on the webinar, just with a link to that, and then also a link to all the resources that we've talked about. So that Leadership Styles Questionnaire and some of the podcast episodes as well. So you'll be able to just easily just access everything and share it out if you need to, or watch it back again. If you do put anything into practice or do the Leadership Styles questionnaire, then do let us know, because it's always nice to hear feedback and to hear that things have been useful for you, because then it just helps us know what sort of resources we should be providing.
Yeah, and they are all free. We're giving a lot of this stuff away. But, that is it. It's all free. It's there to be shared, and please get in touch. Thank you. Thanks, Soph.
Okay. I think that's everything. Right. Well, we'll hold it there. Everybody's got time to get a cup of tea. If you do want to come back for the next webinar at 11, then if you scroll up to the top of the chat box, you'll find a link to it if you're not already registered. And we'll see you in sort of 20, 25 minutes. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.